Greetings, Rob Simpson, Bruce Boudreau, Simmer and Gabby. Hey, Gabby.
How are you doing today, Simmer?
I'm not too bad.
That's good. That's good.
It's VancouverHockeyInsider.com. Simmer and Gabby all over your audio networks and also at SimmerPuck at YouTube, of course. And speaking of VancouverHockeyInsider.com, your former team right now is red hot, and Quinn Hughes was just named the first star of the week. That part probably doesn't surprise you at all.
Doesn't at all. He's a great player. He was a great player when I was there. I've said it on record many times. I think out of all the years that I've been in hockey, that he's the best passer, or in the top three anyway, passers I've ever seen. And he can go from the goal line to the red line on a dart. He can turn. He's very, very difficult to corner, and his evade ability, because of his ability to skate, his edges are so good that nothing surprises me with him. The only thing that sort of surprised me at all about Quinn is that he didn't score more often last year, because I know we had talked many times in the summer, and he was working on his shot and he wanted to shoot it more, and we talked about shooting it more. And it was going to happen, and he did shoot. It just wasn't going in. Now it's they're starting to go in, and there's no doubt in my mind that he should reach double digits in goals this year.
And of course, named captain before the season started. I think he loves that. Not the most prolific guy with the media, but I think he puts up with it because I think he enjoys being in that position. So good for him. We'll talk more about his club here in a second, but as we always do, we'll start off with a little history lesson and a little fun from the background of hockey, and that would be our favorite number 18s today. And I wonder if we're going to have the same one. Probably not.
Probably not. I got three of them, but and I was involved with all three of them as far as teammates or just part of the organization. So let me hear yours first.
All right, I'll go first this week, and it's going to be John Wensick.
Oh, nowhere near who I was thinking. So.
I'll never forget. I think it was 78, I believe, when he confronted the entire Minnesota North Stars bench. He said, "Come and get it," and none of them came to get it. Big guy at the time. He had the big fro. I think they called him Moose. He was about 6 foot, 205 pounds. He's fixing up. He actually played 3 games for the St. Louis Blues originally. Wensick did. And he's living back in Missouri, working on houses and stuff. I interviewed him for a book about, oh God, must be 15 years ago now, but great guy to talk to. And obviously one of the scary guys on those 70s Bruins teams.
I thought he was bigger than what you just said, but that with the hair, if anybody doesn't remember them, but have seen the movie Slapshot, he looked like Ogie Oglethorpe. And it's funny, I was on the NHL Network the other day, and I referred to that after we were talking about Brad Marchand's hit on the defenseman for Toronto, and that when he went to the bench and no one sort of said anything, everybody was looking for nickels at that time, except Brian Reeves, and so it brought up the whole Wensick thing. Very scary. That whole team was scary if you played against them. They had toughness on every line. But I played with one guy in that era who was number 18, was maybe the funniest guy I've ever met, was Jim McKenney. Dennis Savard was probably the best player ever at number 18, but the guy I would be choosing to talk to was the guy that gave me my first chance at coaching at the AHL level, was Dave Taylor. From the LA Kings, a guy that I still think should be in the Hockey Hall of Fame when I look at what he's done and what other people have done that are there, and would love to see him. But he gave me one of the nicest men I've ever met, and one of the best players, played on one of the best lines in the history of the game, in the Triple Crown line with Dion and Charlie Simmer. But I would I don't think I'd be doing this podcast with you if it wasn't for Dave Taylor, who got me started. Him and Bill O'Flaherty from the Kings in the right direction.
Wow. Very, very nice. Yes. Only had a chance to run into him, speak to him maybe a couple times, and was a super nice dude. So, and those Kings teams, they never got over the hump back then, but you're right. Him and Marcel Dion and Charlie Simmer were pretty much magic.
Well, I can tell you, if that line was in Toronto or Montreal at the time, or Vancouver, I mean, they would have been a household name, as you know. They would have had another nickname, like Montreal's all their great lines and Toronto's had their great lines. So it would have been pretty special. But he was good. And I mean, you know what? We got drafted in the same year. And we both started off in the Central League. I think he did a little bit more with his time than I did. So it was good.
Speaking of lines in Vancouver, we'll get back to the Canucks here, and I want to just read something that a quote that I jotted down from Rick Tocchet. And forget analytics, because this right here is the game for me. I think it was a Russian reporter asking about Andrei Kuzmenko, and Tocchet said it's not about individual stats; it's a team game. If he scores, that's great for us, but it's also the other parts of the game. We're winning because of the team. I'm not a big individual guy. Obviously, he's got a score for us, but it's more the team game. And I think that's why our team is winning right now. We're buying into that. And buy-in is always a big word for me. And obviously, Gabby, you can address this firsthand. If you got the boys buying into what you're selling, you are halfway through the battle.
Oh, absolutely. You don't win unless, well, I mean, if you're not very good, you're not going to be very good. But I mean, buying in is something that I don't think I've ever had a problem with it. So I have a hard time, talking about it, because I think everybody, when you're talking together and you communicate, right, they buy in. And I'm glad Kuzi's doing that. And at the beginning of last year, we had to sit him out a couple games, because I mean, he would be great one night and not so great the other night. And I think he learned. And I mean, and taking nothing away, I agree with Rick 100%. But last year he was on a 1-year contract, and sometimes when you come over from Russia and you're on a 1-year contract, the only way you're going to get multi-year deals is if you do score, and that's his thing. And we want him to play a two-way game right off the bat, and a 200-foot game. But sometimes you're looking at your self-preservation, and I think he found out he could score, and he found out that he could play in the last 5 minutes of the game and with an empty netter every now and again. So once he started doing that, the sky was the limit, and I'm really happy to see that he's doing both, and they're happy with his game. So that's good on him.
Yep. Canucks right now with the second most points in the Western Conference. They're 8-2-1. They have 17 points. We talked about Hughes, high-end talent. Obviously, Pettersson, high-end talent. We've talked about JT Miller in the past. So maybe this should come as no surprise, especially with Filip Hronek coming over last year and joining Hughes on the blue line on that top pair. So, I mean, we talk about the Kraken with John Forsland pretty much every week. That's a team that lacks a superstar. Vancouver right now might have 3 or 4 of them.
Well, I know for sure in the superstar category that they would have Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson.
And maybe Demko.
And Demko. That, to me, well, he's the key, no matter how good your team is. I mean, if you don't have great goaltending, ask the team they play tonight that's struggling in goal. I mean, when your save percentage is 860, 850, I mean, you're not going to win a lot of games. And that's, but Demko is back to where Demko was.
Lundqvist pass to the side. Tyler Seguin in front. Demko, great save. Loose puck. And they couldn't put it home. Now Johnson. Oh, Demko with the glove.
And my first year there, he was outstanding. So we won. The second year we had problems in net, but that was like people have said. I mean, goaltending is 70% of the game. Unless you don't have it, then it's 100% of the game. So, but he's the star. Pettersson's the star. Quinn Hughes is they're all superstars, I think, in my mind. Then you have stars. You have JT Miller as a star. Hronek is an upcoming star. I don't know why Detroit would have got rid of him, but they did. JT Miller is a really good player. I mean, and with a guy that almost got 100 points, you'd have to call him a star. Brock Besser's got potential to be a star. Kuzmenko's got to be potential to be a star. They got a lot of guys on that team that can play, and it's good on them. And I'm really happy for all the players that are having all the success.
By the way, Filip Hronek, I think change of scenery was a big thing for him. He's a mid-20s guy, very talented right shot. Obviously, Canucks were looking for a right shot. Part of it sounded like chemistry/attitude, but of course, chemistry/attitude in Detroit can change with that change of scenery. And it sounds like maybe that's part of it. It was just, he was, I don't want to say worn out his welcome. I think just the whole thing wasn't working anymore, and it was time to move on. And here he is flourishing with Quinn Hughes, which is probably not a difficult assignment.
No, and you know what? It's sometimes nobody's fault. Just
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't work for one team or the other. We've seen it in every sport. That I mean, some guy who might have been mediocre or average at best, that goes to another team and becomes a superstar.
Yeah.
And it's maybe that word is used too much, but becomes a very good player. And I don't think Filip Hronek is any different. He's always had the offensive ability. I mean, and he's obviously the whole Vancouver team has picked up the defensive part of the game, and he's obviously doing a really good job.
You brought up the goaltending in Edmonton. They play the Canucks tonight. Canucks may be a surprise. I mean, 8-2-1 is a surprise, but we knew they'd be better based on all the reasons we brought up, especially with a healthy Demko. On the flip side, the Edmonton Oilers, holy smokes, 2-7-1. Maybe not a surprise when you look at them in their own end and have seen them in their own end over the course of time and their goaltending. Man, oh man, not a pretty sight.
No, but before we get to Edmonton too, the other thing Canucks have done is their backup Casey DeSmith is an NHL goalie too, and has got NHL experience, and not putting any of the blame on anybody, because I mean they're young goalies, but when they, Spencer Martin and Colin Delia gave it their best shot. But I mean, to have those established NHL goaltenders is a real big plus. Like in Edmonton right now, I mean, I was listening to their game. I was driving home from somewhere yesterday, and they were really lamenting the goaltending. And when you, like I said, it's a struggle, but it's the first thing you look at. You don't look at the defensive play a lot of the times. You don't look at the guys back checking or tracking, but you always can see the replay of guys scoring goals. And it's a tough job. There's no doubt that's one job in hockey I would never have wanted to have.
Yeah. Tough to watch McDavid have to go through those media availabilities every day talking about how.
Yeah, that's tough. But I mean, I know it. I know all about it when you're losing. I mean, we want to be up there when things are going good. And this is what I always said, but you got to be able to face the music when things aren't going good. So, I mean, he's a professional. He'll get through it. He'll do it. Do a good job.
I want to switch gears a little bit today to the Central Division and talk about a team close to your heart because you worked for them. And also it's just it's the state of hockey as they refer to it. And that would be Minnesota. And of course, the Minnesota Wild. First of all, just for some background, it's all, I don't know if you got as much publicity there as you did obviously in Vancouver, and you got plenty in Washington with Ovi and of course your Winter Classic appearances and Anaheim. But just talk about being a part. It's almost a Canadian culture, like Michigan in a way. Minnesota is hockey.
Yeah, I mean, they're almost Canadian because they're so polite. Everybody knows, everybody's thank you and everything. But they're quiet people, and I think and where they're situated, it doesn't. You're not the most press media savvy. They got Mike Russo, who's as good a reporter as you're ever going to find. But I mean, for the most part, Minnesota is a pretty quiet town, but they know you on the streets. It's not like Anaheim where you could have lit a bomb down the middle of Main Street and they wouldn't know you're a hockey player. But I mean, it's they knew you everywhere you went. They talked to you. They've got They got all the sports bars have hockey games on at night. I mean, they still have an incredible, and I say incredible, high school tournament and high school hockey, better than anywhere in the country, where you can put 21,000 people in the St. Paul arena, and they hold the record for attendance. And it's not an NHL game; it's St. Paul hockey, or Minnesota high school hockey. But the thing that I loved about there, I mean, the weather is pretty cold, as you would imagine, but I mean, you dress for it. If you're used to Canadian winters, you're used to Minnesota, is around every corner, there's so many little lakes there. Okay. Around every corner in the winter, there's hockey nets on the ice, and it's frozen ponds. And I mean, you can see the place where all the kids have shoveled the snow. I mean, there was one time there were kids playing. I just stopped after practice, went out there on the ice with them, because they looked like they were having so much fun, and just got to chat with them and play a little street hockey or ice ball hockey on the ice with them. It was great.
That's awesome. Their club, it's quite a grouping in the Central. It's super competitive. There's only 5 points separating everyone. Dallas on top at 15. Minnesota's next to last, quote unquote, next to last at 7th, but they have 10 points tied with Nashville. They're only 5 points out of first. It's pretty tight. When you think of their club in general, I mean, they've got most of their guys under contract. They have a forward group. Kaprizov is a star. There's no question about that. What do you think about things in general? They have solid goaltending.
Well, I mean, I think with Minnesota, and they've always been known as a really good defensive team. They've always been known as a team that sort of lacked the stars, but they had a lot of good players. I mean, they had Marian Gaborik, they have Zach Parise, they have, and now they have Kaprizov. I think the problem, and I hate to use that word, but last year, after, say, January 1st, they had probably the number one defensive team in the league. And I think the goalie was at a .930 save percentage. Okay. Yeah. Now, the big difference is this year they're second or third worst, and their goaltending isn't as good, and they're missing their defense. I don't think people that don't watch them don't realize how big a player or how good a player Jared Spurgeon is.
Right.
I think they missed Matt Dumba because he was, from the time I was there to the time I left, he was part of that core four defense of, it was Dumba, Brodin, Spurgeon, Suter. And I mean, all of a sudden they're started to get a little bit younger on defense, and they got a rookie, Brock Faber, makes some great plays. He's going to be a good player, but he's going to make rookie mistakes. Goligoski's in and out of the lineup. They've got, Middleton was great with Spurgeon, but he's, their defense isn't as good. So, I mean, they play a great way. Bob Woods does a great job with the D. Dean does a good job with the team, but sometimes they're a little weaker on D, like they are this year. So they've got to score more, and Kaprizov hasn't done the scoring to start the season that he normally would. So consequently, you get a little, you lose a little bit more than you win. But I firmly believe this team will catch fire at some point again. The Spurgeon will come back, and they'll get healthy, and the goaltending flurry. And I forget what's his name, the Russian guy. I forget his name.
Well, they have the Filip Gustafsson.
Yeah, Gustafsson. He's not Russian. He's European. Sorry.
Swedish.
We'll get it right, and they'll be a real good team, and they'll challenge for the first, second, or third. I think first and second is going to be Colorado, Dallas, but I think third through fifth is going to be a crapshoot right to the end.
Yeah. Well, excellent analysis, and timely as well, because it's looking like Spurgeon, who had the upper body injury in the preseason game, could be back. He skated for the full hour with the team Monday, which is the day we're recording this right now, on Monday. He skated today and could be back in the lineup here almost immediately. So that is great news for them. And of course, you mentioned Matt Dumba. His name was on the trade block for so long, and he ends up now as an Arizona Coyote. But he's a veteran guy and a depth guy and a strong player. He didn't have the offensive numbers people thought he was originally going to have.
The one year when, he played until December that I was there, and he had as a defenseman, I think he had 10 goals by December, and then blew out his shoulder or his upper body and missed the rest of the year. And I think that really took a toll on him. It took a long time to get back the next year. And I think that year the next year only had one power play goal. And that really, because he's got a great shot. He's really good at jumping into the play. He's, got offensive instincts. So, you keep waiting. I keep waiting for him to burst out and, get into double digits and goals again, but we'll see.
How would you summarize your time there?
I loved it. One thing, I've loved everywhere I've gone. The first year was great. We had 110 points. We had 100 points plus the second year. The third year, it was, we had an over 500 record, but I think Paul Fenton was trying to change the whole direction of the team and made 3 big trades at the trade deadline, and it hurt us a lot. The fourth year, I knew that again, sometimes coaches have an idea that their days are numbered, and I knew it was on the last year of my deal, so I wasn't really expecting much. That was the only time that surprised me, though, because we were on an 8-3-1 run, and we had clawed back to within 2 points of a playoff spot, and we were about to play San Jose twice, Columbus and Vancouver, as a matter of fact. And I thought, okay, we're going to make the jump, and then it surprised me by getting the news at that point in time.
Was that Fenton, by the way?
Oh, that was Billy Guerin.
It switched to Billy Guerin. Okay. You were 4 games above 500 at the time, and then you mentioned your
and the funny thing is, it was 4 games above 500, but we started out 0-5-2.
Oof.
So after the game 7, we were 9 games above 500. We were in the upper half of the league from the game 8 on. And it was just one of those things that, couldn't get any traction at the beginning, but once we got it, and what's funny is how things can come close. The Rangers just played Minnesota, and Minnesota beat them in a shootout. My last game was against the Rangers in Minnesota, where we lost in a shootout. And when I got let go the next day, they asked Billy Guerin, would he have been let go if we had a 1? And he said, probably not. Okay. So that's how close things come.
Shootout.
Could have been 9-3, and going into those 4 games. And I'm sure, because I know they won 2 out of the next 4, but I think the first game they lost was more because it was sort of a surprise to everybody, and the team had to get pulled together again. But we would have had a good record, and it was the lockout year, or not the lockout year, but the pandemic year. And I think we would have done pretty good for the rest of the year.
Billy Guerin, gonna have to call him and give him some grief, because that's kind of weird if you win the shootout. Some coaches hate the shootout, and here you are getting fired basically because.
He did tell me. That he was thinking about it for a while.
Right. Is that a case of new GM wants his own guy thing?
I'm sure it is. There's not too many coaches that last through 3 GMs. I'm sure it was happening at some point, but we kept winning, and I think that's the problem. Well, I keep winning. I can't fire the guy. Yeah, but so.
But he lost that shootout last night, so I guess this is the time.
Now's the time to get him gone.
I don't remember what they ended up doing that year. They
ended up making the playoffs, losing to either Vancouver, I think, in the preliminary round, because it was, I think 21 teams or so, or 22 teams made the sort of preliminary round. The next round would sort of been classified in my mind as the playoffs, but this was the teams that lose in that round want to call it that they made the playoffs. Teams that win don't classify it as much.
Yeah, officially the prelims, and you're right, Vancouver beat Minnesota. It was not considered the first round of the postseason. We're going to hop here in a few minutes as our time goes ticky-tick. I just want to mention one other thing here that popped up, unless, of course, I got rid of it by accident. Oh, no, here it is. And Minnesota fits right into this. I received a press release this morning from USA Hockey. I found this fascinating. Says USA Hockey announced today that it has surpassed 100,000 players in its 8 and under age category for the 13th time since 2010-11. And the only year they didn't reach it was during the pandemic. So 100,000 kids under the age of 8 in the United States playing hockey for the 13th time in 14 years. Minnesota's a big part of that, but pretty cool to see that, it's still growing, it's still cranking.
And that's wonderful. I mean, when you want to see hockey growth, and as a matter of fact, as you look at the Americans that are coming into the game and high-end Americans, more kids are playing, and it just makes sense that if you know the States, that once they get their hold on something athletically, they go all out, and hockey is something that has really grown by leaps and bounds here. And to see 100,000 young kids under the age of 8 play, it makes you feel good, and it's a really good thing for the U.S.
But potential bad news, given those big numbers, the talent opportunities only increase, could be tough news for Canada at the 2042 Olympics, Gabby. So they'll have to be careful there.
I don't think I'm ever worried about Canada's hockey acumen.
No.
They're going to be great. What Minnesota is like, it's like every town in Canada.
Yeah.
So I mean, we may only have 40,000 people living up there, but 37,000 of the 37 million of them play hockey. So it's all good.
All right. One last message before we go. Gabby's getting a colonoscopy this week. I had one last year, and everybody should out. I remember when Brian Murray, his message when he had cancer, he passed away from prostate cancer, the longtime Ottawa executive. He said, hey, fellas, get your ass into the doctor, get your prostate checked. Well, this is the other one, the colonoscopy, men and women. Do it. Gabby's doing it. I did it. You got to do it. It sucks. You go through it for a couple of days, but
if you know me, it's the 24 hours that you can't eat the day before is the killer. But I mean, it's something that's, you have to do, and your health is too important. Get it done, everybody. Get it done.
And on that, we bid you adieu. Gabby, thank you very much. Great stuff. Enjoy the hockey action, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
See you later. Have a good night.